right, let's sit tall and we'll close the eyes. And just take a few breaths mindfully. With each inhalation, acknowledge to yourself that you are receiving a gift, a multifaceted diamond, life, consciousness, empowerment, existence. And with each exhalation, that you're sharing that gift with all others in just as pure and innocent and complete a way as it was given to you. Each breath in is the gift of life, and each breath out is the expression of gratitude for that gift. Drawing the hands together in front of the heart. Allow that gratitude to fill you up from the inside, the deepest realm of your being. The acknowledgement of the truth of yourself, the innermost self, and acceptance of your wholeness. And together we'll lift our voices in one Om. Take a breath in. Om. And sharing with you the invocatory mantras. Ganana antva ganapatigum havamahe kavin kavinam upamashravastamam Jyestarajam brahmanan brahmanaspata anapshrinvanu tibisida sadhanam Mahaganapataye namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vajepirvajini Vati Tinama Vitriyavatu Ano Devo Brahataf Parvata Da Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujushana Gritachi Shagmam Novacha Mushati Shrinotu Vagdevye Namaha. Bowing the head to the heart. And drawing the face to center, releasing the hands, fluttering the eyes open. Hello, welcome, good to see you all today. Good to see you all today. So, today I thought that we would talk a little bit about three aspects of our human existence. Three very powerful driving forces that we are constantly confusing with each other. And those are satisfaction, happiness, and contentment. And typically, when we're in a rush, we'll put them all in the same basket. That which makes me happy, that which makes me satisfied, also makes me content. And it's not true. It is an oversimplification. And oversimplifications cause great confusion. Because that word satisfaction, what is satisfaction? Satisfaction in our human experience, satisfaction in our egoic experience, whether it's a healthy ego or an unhealthy ego. Satisfaction is that which makes me feel good. It's that which gives me what I expect. It's that which doesn't inconvenience me. It's that which doesn't put any obstacles in my way. Satisfaction will typically come about in our human experience when it's ego-based, when everything is going smooth. But the moment that a weed grows in your garden, or a bee stings you, or you have a fender bender at the shopping mall parking lot, or someone looks at you the wrong way, or a cloud covers the sun, the moment any of that happens, there goes satisfaction. And the reason for the whimsical nature of satisfaction is because we rely upon things that are completely transient in order to acquire satisfaction, things that are highly changeable, and things that are outside of ourself. The sun, the weeds, the other people. So satisfaction is not conducive to happiness, and it's not conducive to contentment. I guess we could be nice and say satisfaction is conducive to a momentary reprieve. But is that even true? Like a momentary reprieve from the stressors of everyday life and living. I finally got my way. But I would suggest that too is an oversimplification. Because actually, the moment that we say to ourselves, oh, I finally got my way, I finally got what I've been waiting for, I'm finally satisfied, then that thought is immediately followed by another thought. Nobody better take this away from me. And worry sets in. And fear and dread and all the emotions and reactions that go along with that. So satisfaction is misused, very much so, in our human experience. It's not that it doesn't have value. Satisfaction has a lot of value. But its value on the one end of the spectrum is highly questionable. And the value that it carries on the other end of the spectrum is immeasurable. I'm not going to tell you what's on the other end of the spectrum yet, because we have to get through 2 more words first. So satisfaction is something that we base our life on day in and day out. How satisfied am I? That's the measure of my happiness. If I'm satisfied in my life, then I guess I must be happy. If we use satisfaction as a measure of happiness, it's no wonder that we are all so deep in the throes of suffering. Because our happiness will only ever be as stable as our satisfaction is. And we've just discussed that that's not very stable at all. So we'll find ourselves continually in a place of dread, of protectionism, of hoarding, of blaming, of looking out at the world and say, why can't you just give me what I want? And then the moment that the satisfaction comes, we start worrying about losing it. So how can worrying about losing something bring us happiness? It can't. So there really, on that end of the spectrum, is not a stable relationship between satisfaction and happiness. There's not really a relationship between the two. Not when satisfaction is ego-based. Not when it's a convenience. Not when it is something that we are looking for out there somewhere. Today I'm 59. As a 59-year-old woman in the world, I have spent most of my life looking for my answers out there. And most of that life has probably not been happy. The time that I spent running here, running there, looking for this, looking for that. It was only when I started turning inside, turning inward, spending more time getting to know myself. Like when I was young, I thought I knew myself, I knew the clothes I wanted to wear. I knew the music I wanted to listen to. I knew the car I wanted to drive. I knew the guy I wanted to date. I knew what I wanted to be, And I looked at all those things, and some people were like, oh, that's so cool and wonderful. And other people were like, you don't really want to do that. Yeah. And that was an inconvenience, and there goes my satisfaction. But anyway. So the more that I thought I knew myself back then, actually the less I knew myself. Because I was basing my self-identification on things that I draped over my body, things that I ate, things that I saw, things that I heard, things that I touched. I was dependent upon the senses to come to know myself. And how can you know the innermost self if you are constantly out there? It's like if you haven't walked in this room and sat in this room, if you've only been in the hall outside, how will you ever know what's in here? You won't. Instead, you'll stand outside and say, well, I'll make some assumptions. Based on what I see out there, I'll assume that that's what's in here. And then you walk in here through the door and you're like, oh, this is not like out there at all. There's beautiful Saraswati and a beautiful altar. And that's similar to what happens when we stop seeking satisfaction outside of ourselves, is that we open the door to self-inquiry and we come in a little bit and we say, oh, wait, this is not at all about what I drape over my body. This is not at all about any of those things that are outside of myself. And then the inquiry starts. What is it about then? What is this self that I'm trying to come to know? That's the first moment of true happiness. The first moment of true and genuine happiness is having a realization, a momentary epiphany, even if it's only momentary. This momentary epiphany of, oh my gosh, dear goddess, I don't have to rely on that outside world to know myself anymore. Like, how amazing is that? The whims of other people, the whims of the weather, the way the weeds grow. None of that has anything to do with who I am on the inside as a whole person. That's the first experience of happiness. It's relief from the bondage of the outside world. Now, interestingly, sometimes I think students misunderstand, because in the tradition we talk a lot about detachment, and we talk a lot about detachment from the world. And students will think that we're talking about not caring, that we're talking about, just kind of, I don't want to hear it. Keep the world out there. Like a bad attitude kind of a thing. They're like, oh, I don't want to not care. I don't want to be like a robot. It's like, no, you don't understand. You've been the robot already. You've been the imposter already. Now you're finding out the reality. You're starting to take steps in the direction of finding out the truth. There's nothing not caring about that. There's nothing monotone or robotic about that. If anything, it's going to cause you to cry like you've never cried, to laugh like you've never laughed, to sleep like you've never slept, to feel things like you've never felt things before. Because there's such a freedom in that happiness, such a freedom, such a relief, that there's nothing that compares to it. Up until the moment that I first sat in meditation, because that's what pulled me in first, And so the meditation I absolutely loved. It was the inner quiet, It was like, oh, there's no crazy in here. Oh my gosh. How can that work? I thought crazy was everywhere. And then I found my way to the asana, the postures, because I was working through a lot of things from my youth, from my childhood, and I needed the physical practices in order to support me in that, in working through the physical tension and the anger that I had over things that happened in my past, in my childhood. So it was like the meditation was there to show me what was waiting for me, what was always waiting for me, what's just simply inherently there inside. And then the asana became the first few steps on the path to learning how to cultivate a longer lasting relationship with the peace that was exposed through meditation. Those were some of the hardest days of my life, but they were also the happiest days of my life. Because it was reassurance after reassurance after reassurance, epiphany after epiphany after epiphany, moments free of satisfaction. I don't have to satisfy the world, and I don't have to be satisfied by the world, because there's something else. There's a much greater truth. So in that regard, we start learning on our spiritual path the similarities, if there really are any, and the differences, which are abundant, between satisfaction and happiness. And we come to this word contentment. Now, how can we be satisfied and content? In the one extreme, the human experience, to be satisfied means to have things go your way, to have things running smoothly and, keeping your emotions at bay because you're appeased. Contentment is the inner strength and ability, the resiliency to remain in a peaceful state no matter what's happening. So those two things sound a bit opposed to each other, don't they? They do. And happiness also, if we're basing happiness on our human experience, on the egoic experience of being alive, and we're going to tie happiness in with satisfaction, then how can there be a relationship between happiness and contentment? Because again, contentment is not dependent upon anything else. Contentment is not force. Contentment is not tolerance. The word tolerance, we've thrown that around quite a bit in our society over the past several years. You should tolerate other people. But every time I hear that, I cringe a little. Because I'm like, what is it to tolerate? Like, I'll tolerate the spider until I can't tolerate the spider anymore. I tolerate spiders, I love them. But your average individual doesn't, right? So we tolerate things until we cannot tolerate them anymore. And then we figure out how to get rid of them, how to remove them from our purview. How to not be bothered by them. So tolerance is not the same thing as contentment, because contentment is not dependent upon anything else. It's not dependent upon things going your way. It's not dependent upon things, going smoothly. Contentment is presence, acceptance, resiliency. It's saying, okay, the sun is shining. That's beautiful. Okay, it's raining. That's beautiful. Or maybe it's not beautiful, but it's okay, because it is what it is. And I don't have to fight it. I don't have to take my limited energetic reserves and apply it to a senseless battle, trying to turn the sun around so that it shines in my favor. Contentment doesn't have anything to do with things going our way. If anything, it's the opposite. A well-established practice of contentment is what gets you through the hard times, because it teaches you how to surrender and say, there are some things I cannot control, and this is one of them. So instead of trying to to force the world to be fixed. Where can I be of service? Where can I be of service? And so I guess we could add a fourth word on here. We have satisfaction, we have happiness, we have contentment, and we have service. And through contentment, our hearts come into what's called the servant heart. We come into the place where we simply want to, as Swami Shraddhananda would say, do good, be good, love all, harm none. But you can't serve if you're worried about being satisfied. Right? You can, you can, but you can't. You can think you're doing it, and you can be going through the actions of it. And there is value to that, because in every action there's an opportunity to wake up to a greater action. In every thought there is an opportunity to wake yourself up to a greater thought. In every half-truth there is an opportunity to wake up to a greater truth. So there still is so much benefit to being of service, even when we ourselves are in turmoil. But the greatest service comes when it is established in a place of contentment, inner contentment, because it's simply what needs to be done, period. We don't want anything back for it. Early on, when I established my very first yoga studio, I wanted it to be a by donation yoga studio, and they weren't popular at that time. Your average class where I was maybe $20, $25 a class, and I was just so no. And I was really amazed by two things. I was amazed at how much backlash from the yoga community itself we received by becoming a by donation center, talking about how we were hurting people and how could we be doing that. And then I was also surprised that in the same moment, how much praise. Oh, I wish I was brave enough to do that. I really wish that we could do that. It's the best thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And in that moment, between being accused and insulted and being praised and adored, I had to step back and say, this is not about me. This is about the yoga. And if you are an individual who needs to charge for your class because you have a family and a rent or a mortgage or whatever, then so be it. And if you are a person who is fortunate enough to be able to offer classes by donation, then so be it. Leave each other alone so that you can each follow the path of Dharma as it is laid out in front of you. Because there's nothing wrong with making a living. And there's also nothing wrong with offering it to everyone and having making a living not be your priority. So I took a little bit of a roundabout there, but I do that. So the seva, or what we call service in the tradition, seva, many of the teachers who were giving us a hard time were also very much of the mindset that they were being of service to the community, which they were. But their service, and my own service in many moments of my own life, would have been so much more profound if it came from a place of contentment and not from a place of satisfaction. Does that make sense? So this contentment, it leads to so many things. It leads to the ability to be selfless. It leads to the ability to be humble. And as human beings, I don't know why, but most of us don't like the word humble. I guess because it's not very satisfying. And it doesn't sound like it's happy. But really, humility is the key. My stepbrother was diagnosed with a rare form of blood cancer many years ago. And thank the divinities, he's fine today. He had treatment and a transplant, and he's doing really, really well. But I remember some of our early conversations, and I asked him one day, we were having this like really intense spiritual conversation, and I said to him, so how do you feel? How do you feel that this is part of your journey? How do you feel that you're the one who received the diagnosis? And he looked at me and he thought for a moment and he said, people ask me that a lot. They make the assumption that like I should be angry. Like, how can you be so calm and happy? Like, you should be angry that you're like diagnosed with this. Why should this happen to you? You're such a good person. Da, 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 da. And he said, the only thing that I could come up with to answer them was, I don't ask why me. Instead, I say, why not me? Why not me? What's so special about me that I shouldn't have this diagnosis? When thousands of people, maybe hundreds of thousands of people throughout the world are also struggling with this. That's contentment. Is to be able to say, why not me? That's humility. That's acceptance. That's reverence for the process of life and existence. And in that contentment, in that humility, he found such happiness and such a deep, profound service in his heart that even though he was going through all of this, he was going off to Israel, he was going off to here, he was going off to there, he was part of a medical group that was going off and working in areas of the world that were in need of medical supplies and personnel. And I would often say, are you making sure to take care of yourself? And his answer to me, and my stepbrother, he's a born-again Christian, his answer to me was, I don't need to take care of myself because God's got me. All I need to do is be of service. And it's potentially the second most beautiful thing he ever said to me. Right? Now, we have satisfaction, we have happiness, we have contentment, we have service, we have humility, and the role that humility plays in this. Humility and satisfaction of the human sort completely diametrically opposed to one another. Unless, what? Unless there is what? Gratitude. True, deep, profound gratitude. And if there is true, profound, deep gratitude in one's heart, then humility and satisfaction get closer to one another and they lift up. And satisfaction moves away from that extreme of our human ego and towards something else. What does it move toward? Higher purpose, truth, divinity. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of God, the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the primary texts in Advaita Vedanta, it is a conversation between an individual named Arjuna. How many of you are not familiar with the Bhagavad Gita? Not familiar. So everybody has heard of, okay. So Arjuna is an individual, he's a warrior. He is an archer. And he is the greatest archer in the world. Maybe. But, yeah, that's another story. So he's on the crux of this battle that he is leading, and he has a cousin who's not really his cousin, it's God, but God in the form of his cousin. Some tellings call him his friend, and others call him a relative. But he has this close person named Krishna, and it turns out that Krishna is not just his cousin, that he is actually the Godhead. And Arjuna has asked him for his support and guidance in this battle. And long story short, Krishna agreed and said that he would be his charioteer. So in that day and age, thousands of years ago, they had chariots and the horses riding the chariots into the battle. And as Arjuna went out, he had Krishna drive him out onto the battlefield, and as he got out there, he looked around to see who was going to be fighting this war. And what he saw on the one side were his brothers, some close friends, his family, a much smaller group of individuals than when he looked in the other direction and saw the current leaders, many of his youthful teachers from when he was a child, many of the individuals who he grew up with, who were now supporting what we could call a corrupt family leading their kingdom. And he broke down because there were people on both sides that he loved, people on both sides that he cared about, people on both sides that he had fond memories of. And so he dropped his bow, and he collapsed in tears in the chariot, and he said to Krishna, still thinking Krishna was his cousin only, I can't do this. I cannot lead this battle. It is better that they come and kill me, that they do me in, than I drop one drop of their blood on this battlefield. It won't happen today. Krishna then tried to explain to Arjuna that the feelings that he was having in that moment were based on the satisfaction end of the spectrum. That if I'm going to have a war, it should be an absolutely proper war. It should only be with bad people, it should only be what fills up my sense of honor. So he was very much operating from that satisfaction end of the spectrum. And he wasn't finding any satisfaction because these were people that he loved on both sides. So there was no happiness to be had here via the vehicle of satisfaction. And Krishna tried kind of explaining this to him in a variety of different ways. He tried to speak to his ego. He said, well, you have to fight this battle. You're a warrior. And if you don't fight the battle, people are going to talk about you. It's going to put a stain on your family name. And Arjuna said, I don't care. I'm not fighting the battle. It doesn't matter. Let them put the stain on my name. And then he said to him, well, in addition to that, you're also mistaken because you think that if you lead your side into this battle, that society is going to fall, that women will be tainted, that ethics will become completely corrupt, that everything will change for the worst. And the reality is that's already happening. So you can't base your decision to not go out into the field on that either. That's the reason why you're leading this battle, is because of the corruption, because of the exploitation Arjuna said, oh, I'm not going. Then Arjuna starts asking him questions. He starts asking Krishna questions about karma and about action, and asking for his wise guidance in understanding dharma and karma and what drives human beings. And Krishna gives him a lot of information in just 18 short chapters. I know, right? But at one point, Arjuna says to Krishna, after everything you have shared with me, after all you have told me about dharma, after all you have told me about karma, after all of this, how do I know that my actions are correct? How do I know that what I'm doing at any point in time, and I'm paraphrasing, but at any point in time is the right thing to do? And Krishna said to him, whatever you think, whatever you say, whatever you do it for me, not for you. Not only will that lead to right action, but it will lead to true happiness. Because there is no satisfaction involved. There is no satisfaction being artificially married to happiness. There's something else instead. And the something else is intending for every word, every thought, and every action to be both a reflection and a fulfillment of all that is sacred in the universe, not of all that is scared. Two really similar words. Sacred, scared. Yeah. Just change two letters around. Right? Sacred and scared. So if we allow, Krishna told Arjuna, if we allow everything about our humanity to rest in divinity, then contentment is ours. And satisfaction takes on a completely different meaning because it is no longer based in the smooth operations of life. It is now simply resting in the understanding that whatever happens in this life, whatever happens, the storms that come and the storms that go, the sun that shines and the clouds that cover the sun, that these are equally sacred. That these are equally sacred. That they have equal meaning. That one is not better than the other. One is not preferable over the other. Because they all have purpose. Does that make some sense? In the world today, there's a lot of discussion about spiritual bypassing. And so around this point of the conversation, I always say, so let's back up for a moment. Spiritual bypassing. These statements are not spiritual bypassing. It's not saying, hey, everything is great. Yay. No, it's not saying that. It's not saying that there's an excuse for poor behavior. It's not saying that if someone hurts you, it's okay. And that there's, you should find a way to deal with it because there's what was meant to happen happened in kind of a passive-aggressive way, right? It's not what we're saying in any way, shape, or form. What we're saying is, if a child walks up to you and kicks you out of nowhere, this happened to my husband once. It's at my son's birthday party. There's a little boy at the birthday party, and the little boy walked up to my husband. He didn't know him. He was like the first time that we met him. His mom was there and stuff, and he was a classmate of my son's. And so all of his classmates were there. The little kid walked up to my husband and he punched him and he kicked him. Right? He punched him and he kicked him. Now think about this. How does the human ego respond to that? Versus the one who sees divinity in everything. Does the child deserve to be punished, taught a lesson, given a talk to, talked sternly to? A lot of people would. Or do you surround the child with compassion? Do you remind yourself, this is a child. This is a child. Do you talk to the child compassionately? Do you teach or do you scold? Does that make? So now we're adults here. We're also children. Because we kick and punch all the time. And we have other people kick and punch us all the time. None of us are exempt from that. There's a little meme that goes around the internet, and I just love because people think that monks are like always peaceful and chill. And this monk is giving someone the finger. You know, and it's like, that's when you know you've had a hard day. Yeah. When a monk gives you the finger, that's when you know you've had a hard day. But the point is that we all have that child who has those types of boundaries that are easily broken. We all punch and kick. We all react. We all do this. So if someone is cruel to you, if someone is mean to you, if someone is insulting you, and Krishna even said to Arjuna, he said, if someone insults you, then you look the other way. Because what they say to you is not about you. What a person says to you is not about you. That's so hard to accept, I know. But what a person says, they can come up to you, they can say, I hate you, you're this, you're that. It has nothing to do with you. It has only to do with their perception and how much they limit themselves in their own capacity to love and accept and nurture. Has nothing to do with you. If you have committed poor behavior, acknowledge it, accept the responsibility for it, correct yourself. But if someone comes to you and accuses you of doing something and you know you didn't do it, don't be insulted. No. This is about the other person looking for someone to blame, thinking that they got the answer, being satisfied in their sleuth capabilities, right? That's all that it is. So don't expend your energy there when there are far more pertinent areas where you can put that energy, including your contentment practices and your work at opening your own heart to becoming a profound servant. A profound servant. I'll open up for questions in a second or comments, but servant is another word that we don't like in the West, right? Servant is another word we don't like in the West. It's such a shame that it has such negative connotation to it, because to be a servant is to love. To be a servant is to love. Michelle is a servant here. Sarvani is a servant here. Absolutely. You know? To be a servant is to express your love by holding in the highest intention that your own thoughts, words, and actions should not only support the end of suffering for other beings, but should also not cause any suffering for other beings. That as you are walking through this world, you in and of yourself would be neutral in that regard. You do not cause, and you only work to alleviate. And for those of you who have an activist's heart and you feel the need to speak out and speak up. It's not contrary to that either. That's the other thing the students will say. They'll say, well, I'm an activist at heart, and this peace stuff is really great, but, I need my protest signs. I'm like, good. Take your protest signs. But I tell you what, your protesting is going to mean so much more when it comes from a place of unity and not just from a place of crass anger. It's just the truth. Because anger is a very slippery slope. Hatred is a very slippery slope. And righteousness is a very slippery slope. And oftentimes those three things become violent, especially when we're not paying close attention. It's very easy for someone who has a righteous intention to become someone who is violent. So in our protests, in our spiritual activism, and I would suggest the Bhagavad Gita is all about spiritual activism. It's about saying corruption, no. Violence based on hatred and greed, no. These things cannot stand. Let's realign ourselves. And sometimes that realignment requires that we become strong, and I don't really like to use the word force, but I will say slightly forceful, in that we need to stand tall in favor and in honor of a better world. Passivity may be the answer for some, but it is not the answer for all. Someone has to milk the cow. Someone has to collect the herbs. Someone has to build the houses. Someone has to maintain the peace. We all have to maintain the peace. So this is not a path that is free of activism. This is a path of activism. But it's a path of higher activism because it's saying, let your activism be coming from that place of contentment, knowing that every word, every thought, and every action of my own is being committed to as a reflection of and in honor of all that is sacred. And then inevitably we come to one more question, which is, but what about people who are like jihadists? I mean, they're doing everything in the name of God, aren't they? It's like, no, they're not. They're doing everything in the name of hate because they see another human being or another being as an infidel. They see them as less than they are. They say, you do not belong. You do not deserve. That is not. Because God is not a God of hatred. God is not a God of superiority, inferiority. God is not an angry God. Unless you live by the Old Testament, then that's what your belief is. But here, divinity is not that. An individual who exists in a state of contentment because their heart and their life and their love belongs to divinity would not harm. They would not harm. And if it came to a point where they needed to do something, it would not be lashing out in anger. It would be protection. It would be protection. Does that make sense? I can talk forever about this, so I'm going to stop there and ask if there's any reflections or questions from anybody. Miss Mirabai.
I'm glad you brought up that last point because that was the question that was in my mind since the line you quoted where Krishna said, "Do it for me."
Mm-hmm.
And immediately I thought of, the guy who shoots the abortion doctor, because he believes that killing is wrong. Like, what an oxymoron that is. But, all the killing in the name of God that goes on. But you said it, that, like, it is a very slippery slope. And it has to be coming from that very balanced place within.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow.
And if you can live in peace, then live in peace. And even when you cannot live in peace, be at peace. Whatever you do, do it with peace. And if you are threatened, then you stand your space in peace. And if you have to raise your fists, then you don't raise them. You know, it's interesting. It's like and I always say in the West because that's where I'm from, you know, but I guess all over the world it's a very human thing that when two people fight, one person gets knocked down. I cannot stand these scenes in movies. They make me cringe. I have to close my eyes. One person gets knocked down, and then what happens? Does the person who knocked that person down help them back up? No. They kick them. They kick them. Right? This is not on behalf of God. If you must harm, then you must follow that harm with help, support. If you have to raise your fist, then you must also know how to lower them and bring peace back to the situation. If you knock someone down, you must help them up. Even if they're only going to try to knock you down again. We must never lose the higher aspect of our humanity. If we lose that capacity completely, then we live in a world of nothing but war. And I really, reading the Bhagavad Gita and Krishna saying that to Arjuna, I think there's another thing that was really important to say is that following the storyline, Krishna understood, of course Krishna understood. Let me say this differently. Krishna tried to have Arjuna understand that there were a few things. Number one, it all happened already. It was all set in motion already. Whatever actions that led to this moment happened. And so this battle is the consequence of those actions. So this battle is going to happen. And number two, the human ego involved in the Kaurava brothers who said, we're going to kill you. We're not going to look for a peaceful end to this. And in that moment, Krishna says to Arjuna, even the individual who sits still and says, I will not make a decision, is making a decision. So should you just lay your life there and say, I'm not going to fight this battle because go ahead and kill me? That's a decision. And that decision has further consequences. That gets really complicated talking about karma and the extended karma of lifetimes and whatnot. But yes, it is slippery slope. And it's a complicated subject for sure. Did you have a question too? Did I answer you, Mirabai, or did I address?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, at the beginning when you were talking about those three words, you were speaking about gratitude. What are some ways to cultivate gratitude in daily life?
Yeah. So this can be very difficult. It can be very difficult. It can also be very easy. Depends on how smooth things are going. Obviously, when the sun is shining, we're all like, oh my gosh, I love the sun. But then the sun, temperatures go up like around noon, and you wore a sweater by mistake, and you start sweating. And you're like, oh, I love the sun, but man, it's too hot, isn't it? Catch yourself there. Catch yourself and remind yourself, this is preference. This is preference. The sun is shining. The trees, the plants, whatever needs the sun is receiving the sun. I'm receiving the sun, my vitamin D, right? So if I have done something to put myself at odds with that moment, let me correct that now and just take my sweater off, right? Have a sip of cool water, whatever it takes. So catch yourself in moments where you're not being grateful and ask yourself why. Why am I choosing to curse, condemn, accuse, whatever it happens to be in that moment? Why am I preferring to begin with? And then to then turn it around and remind yourself that somewhere, there are trees, there's grass, there's plants that are benefiting from this. There are people who were cold who are now warm. And we're so silly, are we not? We turn the heat up to 80 in the winter, and we turn the AC down to 31 in the summer. All we got to do is live with the seasons. So we can also recognize our own hysteria and kind of have a little bit of fun with it, and recognize, well, this is an opportunity to grow, is it not? It's an opportunity to look out and to say, what small changes can I make that allow me to have a little bit more balance, like what we were talking about in the postures before, equal balance, right? Cultivating gratitude is having enough contentment within oneself that we can look at any situation, no matter how difficult it may be, and recognize that there is potential there. So, what is the potential of war besides all the horrific things that go along with it? What is the potential of war besides all the horrific things that go along with it? The reclamation of peace. The reclamation of peace. Well, what needs to happen in order for the reclamation of peace to become more powerful than all the horrific things that happen with war? Then we need to focus on peace. So let me turn myself toward peace and focus on what I need to bring that about, to minimize, to reduce, to soften the insults of war. Being of service. And then as you see the relief that service brings to others as well as to yourself, then you can feel grateful to be empowered to be there in that moment, to bring forth what's sacred, to bring forth the better part of humanity. You can be grateful that that's part of your life. Yeah. And I could go on. You could write 5 things a day in your journal, Here's the problem with that. I do suggest to people that they do that, but I follow it up with something else. So when you journal in the morning, you can list out 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for today, right? Then you close your journal. Where are those 3 to 5 things? They're on a page that you forgot you just wrote. Because then you go and you find out that your coffee maker overflowed and your car won't start and your boss is yelling at you and you're like, ah. No. It's not just writing what I'm grateful for in the journal, it's writing it into the heart as well. It's having a mantra. So either a Sanskrit mantra or an affirmation. So English words are affirmations. Sanskrit words and other languages also, they have, the only word I can think of right now is official. What's another word? Authentic, thank you. Authentic mantras. Official mantras. It's an official mantra. That's so funny. Authentic mantras, right? So having something that you carry throughout your day, whether it be an affirmation or a mantra, that brings you back to that gratitude continually. Not just what you wrote in your journal, but all other gratitudes as well. Yeah. Absolutely. Any other questions or reflections for today? No? Dr. Jeff?
A possible summary of the portion relating to satisfaction, contentment. I can be uncomfortable, yet know I'm not in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm.
So I can be more at one with whatever's happening.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that has 2 levels to it, at least. It has the human level, which is the body-mind level of I can be uncomfortable, but I know I am not in jeopardy, body-mind jeopardy. And then there's another level which comes through significant, dedicated sadhana, spiritual practice. And that is, no matter what the discomfort is, even if my body and mind are in jeopardy, I am never in jeopardy. Never. The spirit is never tainted by the material world. That takes quite a few lifetimes. Or maybe one or two, I don't know. But yeah, I think that takes quite a few lifetimes to get that one. But yes, Dr. Jeff, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's sit tall. We'll close the eyes. Take a nice breath in and a nice breath out. Draw the hands together in front of the heart. And if you're so called, you can repeat after me. I choose contentment based in sacredness, wholeness, and oneness. I choose satisfaction and happiness to be in the realm of the sacred and not the ego. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Together we'll lift our voices in one Om. Take a breath in. Om. Bowing the head to the heart. And draw the face to center, fluttering the eyes open. So good to gather with you, to see each and every one of you today. I wish you all a beautiful and amazing day. May you be gently uncomfortable so that you can practice your contentment. Yeah. And may you be wholly inspired so that you have epiphany after epiphany after epiphany of the truth of yourself. So if you have not had brunch yet, they're still serving. Please do. And as you go down to the kitchen, give them a lot of love. Linda and DJ and Lydia and Michelle is in there also. Were you there today at all? Not really. Yeah, but you are there. Give them a lot of love. They do a lot of service so that your bellies are happy. And then if you're available this evening, we do still have some spaces left for our full moon experience. It will be 6 o'clock kirtan with a little bit of satsang, and then a drum circle with Michael Klipman. And in between there will be some birthday cake and cookies. Yeah. So we hope to see you tonight. If not, we'll see you again very soon, I'm sure. Be well, everyone. Thank you. Good. Very good.